Hello, and welcome to American Amnesia. I am your host, Cliff Garner, and I've been talking about Antifa, or Antifa, however you want to pronounce it, at various points here. I started with the Charlottesville incident, and I've worked from there. There continue to be repercussions from Charlottesville. The Well, the fact is that Trump denounced the far right a long time ago, the KKK, the neo Nazis, however you want to put it. I can demonstrate that they're not really far right. That there's another a series of clusters, actually, of ideological ideas, kind of a flux, as it were, of ideas that doesn't really correspond to a left-right paradigm. That really, it's more, I don't know, maybe more of a globe or crystalline structure of some sort. But at the same time, the fact is that we've used this left-right paradigm for so long that as a reference point, at least for labeling or allowing some people to label themselves, it has been at least useful in that regard. Um, it is becoming increasingly and more obviously obsolete. And I think that's great because it really isn't the correct measure of comparative ideas. It's completely fallacious. It's something else. And uh, let's face it, it was the original seating in the French Senate, and the Senate, and it went from left to right, with the right being the monarchists, to the conservatives, to the centrists, to the Girondists, and then the Jacobins to the left. And that pattern doesn't always hold up. It just doesn't. The interactions of thought um, are more of a flux. There's gradations and shadings that we don't often even see. I mean, we're not made aware of them because we try to force fit everything into the paradigm that we've been given, and actually that has been blown out a long time ago. And I can demonstrate very easily the flux between uh, Marxism to socialism to uh, Nazism, which is National Socialism. It's just a different variant in that regard, if you want to go to it, to fascism, and that flux is consistent. That very going from one to the next can be quantified, and they are tied together. Now, that doesn't mean that all forms of socialism go into something that is necessarily authoritarian. There are certain anti-state ideas, which what anarchism is. It's an anti-statist concept, and the foundations of what would constitute a society under anarchism varies from place to place and idea to idea. But the old thinking was usually more socialistic. Although there's a lot of people that live without government and rules and everything else, and they live quite well, but they're not necessarily um, fulfilling a philosophical concept. Think about it. That was one of the reasons why uh, the anarchistic creeds very easily glommed onto various concepts of criminality as a political expression. That should tell you something. And I was one of the ones that went into that. I truly got into that. You start looking at different art forms and their political overtones, and you come to Dada. The most Dadaistic thing that you could do is to go out in the street and start shooting. Terrorism, even meaningless terrorism, is a fulfillment in that sense of Dada. So you do have these connections and these different ideas, and really what we're dealing with now is a postmodernistic interpretation of politics, which naturally should, at the most extreme end, devolve into total meaninglessness. Go figure. And it does. I mean, that's really what you're dealing with Antifa. It's deconstructed of meaning. The meaning is gone. Even the concepts of communism and anarchism, which they're trying to, some of them think that they're wedding, which is an impossibility. And you can view anarchism as being the utopia of Marx. And you would do so with a certain amount of justification. But Marx had always made as his preliminary fulfillment of communism as the dictatorship of the proletariat. Now, these crybullies are not working. For the most part, for them to claim to represent working people is an utter travesty, and it's funny how that they try to beat working people into line. The unions aren't fooled either. Now, you go back to some of the unions, and a lot of them very reputable unions. Go back to an anarcho-syndicalist political philosophy, and they're not going along with these bullies. Now there are other political groups that are, and that's one of the things about Antifa that we have to keep in mind. It really is not a top-down group that dictates who belongs and who doesn't. Generally, what it is it's a lot of smaller groups, often local, but they all share a certain. I don't want to say vision, because it really isn't that good or clear of an aim, but they do kind of come together in a sort of weird philosophical way. The red signifying a communist, basically Marxist, and of course you have your Leninist, Stalinist, North Korean, just all the different variants, Maoist, what have you, Trotskyite, all these different red communistic ideas. And then you have the anarchistic, Bakunin and Proudhon, and many other thinkers. And that's the thing. Generally, they are left anarchist. In fact, almost all of them. I don't think that you're going to find too many anarcho-capitalists running around out there. You'll probably find certain of the feminist varieties, and certain of the green, probably some of the gay groups that have latched on to anarchistic philosophy and ideas of political expression. And generally, what they've come to is basically the Black Bloc, which derived out of a long tradition of violent street politics. They call this direct action. And I think you can see why they call it that. This is some groups, their interpretation of democracy isn't a majority rule. Really, it's more of a might makes right in the street. Who can bring out the most people at the club? And that's really what you're seeing here. When they say democracy, they've changed. It's like a cult, you know. In fact, one of the things is you're going to see there are certain cults that get involved with all this, and that they are well, they're just they're part of that flux, right? You know, the flow of the ideas from one place to the next. They're part of the flux, and they've entered into it from there. And all this goes back to the Spartacist League in pre-Nazi Germany, in Weimar Germany, like 1919, I think it was, and then I think that was the year that Rosa Luxemburg was executed. But that's what they were doing. They were going around. They were beating up capitalists, and you know, which really could be anybody. They're going to get them. You know, I don't think they really got too many really big name capitalists. Although when they overthrew the government in Munich, okay, this set the stage for the Nazis, and the Nazis borrowed their tactics of terrorism and assassination, and of just really street violence. The Nazis didn't do that at first. The brown shirts came a little bit later, but prior to really Hitler even joining the Nazi Party, you had an overthrow of the Republic of Bavaria, and that's what they named it. They chased one of the last of the Wittgensteins or something. I don't remember the family name, but they were a powerful family over Bavaria. They were Catholic rulers, and they were kind of chased out of town, and so they declared a republic. And I don't remember, but the family had a long history of being crazy, which is really kind of funny. Kind of the wrong place to go into, because it really didn't have too much to do with what went on. But they overthrew the government of Bavaria, which was ruled by a king, or a duke or prince or something. I don't remember what it was. And they established a Soviet republic, and they started massacring who they got their hands on. So they got their hands on a few rich people, killed them, butchered them, and they went after the National Socialist Workers' Party, which was the precursor to the National Socialist German Party, with NASDAQ, and that would be the Nazis. And Hitler would join later. But Hitler was actually involved with the cleanup operation that murdered the Spartacist League. This is the kind of idiocy that could lead to really terrible things in the future. And I don't foresee most people going along with a communist type of government, including a lot of the Democrats that are backing Antifa, or backing away from Antifa now. But they embraced them at one point, right? So why did they embrace them? Well, they're looking for a new, terrorist wing. They're getting back in the corner on the voting fraud that they've been doing for years. Thank God. They're getting that Hillary Clinton was caught for her pay for play. Other people are getting caught for it too. It's like dominoes. They're all falling down all at once, and they can't they can't quell everything that's coming out. I mean, it's just oozing all over the place, and their corruption is so obvious that they can't stop the flow. They can yell and scream, but the repetition of the same thing over and over and over and over again with the same people, and the people that are associated with those people are all crooks. They even make McCain look good, and he was one of the Keating Five. And even he, in that part of the party, of the Republican Party, they're coming under scrutiny. The corruption of the dominant establishment parties could spell the end to the two-party system. I'm surely hoping so. Because what we need is really to actually bring about more of a coalition politics in which we have a lot of ideas out there, and that we put them together and have them work together. Think about it. That's really what we need. We need to get away from the two-party system in which basically what they've done is they've erected a false center. And this false center is really the neocons to the neolibs, with a fake center of people like McCain, covering over a wide variety of ideas that are not put on the table at all. I mean, we get little bits and pieces, with interesting people like the Pauls, in the Republican Party, and people like Kucinich, right, who in the Democratic Party. We do get this from time to time, and we get Bernie Sanders as an independent. Actually, he was a social democrat. He was originally a member of the Socialist Party. So I mean, I would rather deal with an honest socialist than a lying centrist any day of the year. It's time for clean government. It's time to put people in that aren't willing to take money under the table for, to extend their power. We don't need that anymore. It's time to jettison this. Good government is what we need. I've argued with people I've cared much about, and they don't want to talk to me anymore, and that's fine. I'm sorry to have that happen, but I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to apologize for what I think, and they know what I think. They want to get mad at me because Trump might be the best message we've had on this. And remember, he is a message, not a messenger. If he were a messenger, it'd be even more powerful. Who knows? Maybe it'll grow into one. But the Democrats treated Obama as a messenger when he didn't really even have a message. That's why they're falling apart right now. That is why they're falling apart. He's a fake. He was a phony. He was an empty shirt. Now, what's happening with Trump is that they're treating him as if he were an empty shirt. The Democrats are, but he's not. And that's the funny thing, because none of it sticks. And really, it was kind of funny because a lot of the accusations against Obama didn't stick. And that's because they were filling him up with everything that they feared or didn't like. But the problem is that he really didn't produce anything. It was all appearance, no substance. So, at any rate, I'm going to read this article real quick here, and I might have to do this in two episodes because I don't want it to be overly long. I mean, my shows are fairly long anyway because what I'm doing is often very nuanced. But I don't want to carry it more than an hour. That's, I think, asking too much from people. But so I'm going to try to show, first of all, that that the connection between the liberals of the Democratic Party and with Antifa was a bad move. Okay, I'm going to go to that direction first. From there, I'm going to talk about and deal with what Antifa is and try to go into that a bit. The next time around, I'm going to try to deal with BAM and the Workers' World Party, and I'll look into the identity of some of the other groups and maybe try to scrounge that up and show you the different fragments that come together as a whole. And with that, I'm going to try to maybe move on to something else after this. But I do want to because what'll happen to Antifa is this: they're going to break. They're going to have a bunch of them go to prison for different crimes, and they've already committed crimes. There are going to be lawsuits that are going to destroy large numbers of those groups as well, just like it happened to the Klan. I don't think we'll lament this too much. But what will happen is just exactly what happened with the others, and there will be fewer of them, but they will go into splinters, and they'll go into different directions and hide. Now in Europe, it's another issue. They're a bit of a different group, and I'm going to try to deal with that as well. So bear with me. So at any rate, what I have here is from July 10th of this year, and it's an article with the Daily Caller, very good publication. And this is called Revealed, the Antifa Plan to Get Liberals to Embrace Violence. And the writer is Justin Caruso. Or Caruso, excuse me, not Carly. An open letter published on an anarchist website urges liberals and progressives to take the side of violent anti-fascist Antifa groups. Antifa has often embraced violent acts like rioting, breaking storefronts, and beating political opponents in the streets, which has correlated with an increasing number of violent incidents directed at conservatives and Republicans. It's going down at a self-described digital community center from anarchist and anti-fascist, autonomous, anti-capitalist, and anti-colonial movements, all in one breath, right? Recently published an open letter to regular liberals and progressives urging them to take the side of the Black Bloc. Now, the Black Bloc has a few different meanings. For one, it is the type of phalanx that the people dressed in black take up in order to actually break through bigger groups and police lines and stuff like that, and to fight. So it's a type of phalanx. It is also a description of the groups themselves, because they all wear black, symbolizing anarchism. Now, you got a whole bunch of them that are carrying red flags and everything else, and sometimes red kerchiefs or whatever, and that symbolizes communism. But the group wearing black doesn't necessarily have to be anarchist. It may be communist and vice versa. So you got this mishmash stuff going But the black bloc is those two things in particular. There are some other smaller implications, but those are the main two. It is going down made headlines in June for reportedly calling for violence against Trump supporters. The article is titled An Open Letter to Liberals and Progressives from the Black Bloc. Quote, it is time for liberals and progressives to lose their illusions about the anarchist movement and our tactics, because quite frankly, you have no one else willing to fight for you. The article, quote unquote, the article reads. The Post also brags about Antifa's confrontational and disruptive tactics. Quote, confrontational and disruptive social movements have been the only thing which have helped to defeat some of Trump's proposed policies, such as the Muslim ban 1.0, and it is only mass disruptive action which has the only hope of putting a wrench in the gears of everything from the deportation machine to the drive to war, unquote, the Post reads. Nonsense. It didn't stop it, for one thing. And we need to ask the question, those happened in airports, those direct actions there. Who allowed that? Think about it. It's the deep state. So the black bloc has gotten a lot of breaks, let's put it that way. You see where this goes? I think you do. I think you do. It continues. Quote, furthermore, it was the intense resistance that anarchists and anti-fascists engaged in after the election, at the inauguration, and against the far right, which made it harder for the regime to roll out the totality of their agenda for fear of full-scale revolt. Again, nonsense. What had happened is the entanglements of the deep state mired down everything that was in motion. Had less to do with the violence and the people in the streets bopping people. But what they're doing is they're trying to convince. You see the rhetorical purpose behind this. They're trying to convince the liberals to embrace violence, which they did. Oh! Which they did. Boy, Soros really messed up. I really do think that Trump knows how to play 3 and 4 and 5 dimensional chess. You know, I'm really starting to see that. This is amazing. Let me return to it. Antifa tactics were used on Inauguration Day in January as well. Did that really help? Or did it make the people that backed them look bad? In the short run, maybe they didn't do so bad. The pussy hats? But this inauguration stuff, I don't think that did so well. As well as UC Berkeley in response to the planned speech from political provocateur Milo Yiannopoulos. And now we got these idiots running around with burning signs that say free speech. Oh, that looks really good. That looks really good. Burning American flags and burning free speech signs. Boy, that's going to really make points with people here in the States. Oh, goodness. The article also directly mentions the violent anti-G20 riots in Hamburg, Germany, which police called extremely violent. And that that connotation, and deserved, because there is a direct link from them to the ones here. They're very similar in composition. They're very similar in ideas. They're similar in tactics. They're similar in ideology. They're similar in just about every way, including the fact that they're a bunch of bums that live at home and don't work, and they scuzz off their parents. You know, I mean, they're crybabies. They haven't. There's not a whole lot of difference, and with the new generation that's in place, it's not a whole lot different over there as it is over here in that respect. And the respect they're getting from people who work is pretty much about the same. I mean, they don't see these people as being their saviors. They don't. The fear is that they go haywire long enough that they might embrace something even worse. The common people might. And that's what we want to not see. Not see. We don't want to see the Nazis come in and swoop up with the common people. We just don't. That would be a terrible thing to happen. And unfortunately, these bozos would think it was a great thing that it happened until they end up getting hauled off and shot. You know, I mean, they're convinced of their success right up to the moment that they realize, oh, we messed up. Well, gee whiz, what was your first clue? Oh, to crack your head. Idiots. Quote, liberals and progressive, your world is on fire, the article reads. Isn't that wonderful? You know, they're looking for a slogan. And there you go. There's your slogan. Quote, the institutions, checks and balances, and the very government that you placed your faith in is decaying all around you. And at every turn, the state seeks to roll back any assemblage of democratic oversight and accountability. Come again? How many of them have ended up in concentration camps so far? Idiots. And it really doesn't take a whole lot to see. Not a whole lot at all. It's kind of as obvious to look on the nose on your face. You know, I mean, they're talking out their rear ends. The Democrats openly plan to move to the right. Oh, really? Is that a fact? As standards of living, the environment, and basic entitlements, rights, and freedoms are attacked. They embraced these idiots. They did. They embraced these idiots. And you know, the funny thing is that when they come out and they criticize me for something I post, all I have to do is whack them with that. Because they did. They're trying to rationalize violence. They were rationalizing it before. They were paying for it. I mean, the whole undercover work that O'Keefe was doing showed that they were doing it. And they were paying these kinds of idiots to do the job and to stir up problems at Trump rallies. And they still do. It just doesn't get any better. I mean, these people are just fools. This isn't a time for you to strengthen these institutions. It's a time for desertion. Oh, but what are you supposed to do? You let the institutions fall and fail and break, and you join them. Oh. Well, why did Soros put these people out there to put this message out there? And they all ran to it like it was some kind of a shelter or something. Why? And you can see the lunacy here. Just obvious lunacy. Quote, "It is time for liberals and progressives to lose their illusions about the anarchist movement and our tactics because, quite frankly, you have no one else willing to fight for you." End quote. This is oh goodness. Let me finish it. The article ends by saying, "We know that we cannot separate fighting against domination and exploitation without the project of building a different world at the same time." Okay, so here's your time to burn the world down. We'll rebuild it in the image we want. In the face, and that's the quote, "In the face of everything that the dominant system and the far right is throwing at us, we urge you, join us." And that's the end of the article. There is so much nonsense per line here. It's really hard to just kind of pick it apart and to show you how stupid this is. But it does define pretty much what Soros wants to do with the U.S. Mr. Soros is a student of Karl Popper. And Popper created the idea of the open society. And his main work is the open society and its enemies. And Soros' own vision of this open society is a bit twisted. But really the ideas of Popper directly fed into those of the Vienna School, which the Koch brothers are probably the foremost proponents of. So what you have with Soros is a radical vision of open borders and basically a gutted society that he can manipulate. That's really the way he has reinterpreted Popper, and which is unfortunate because Popper actually put forward some pretty good ideas, and he dealt with the really was the one that brought out the idea of falsification as being a means of determining truth. Can you falsify it? If you can't, then it's not necessarily a true proposition, because to be unable to declare it as false, what you're doing is you're actually trying to protect that idea as an absolute that's untouchable. Okay, so what he's done to Popper is actually kind of shameful, but he does want to create the open society as he sees it. That's what he did in Ukraine when he got the chance, and he did the color revolution over there. I think it was orange. And there was murders, and there were assassinations, there were riots. I mean, just kind of the same thing what we're seeing over here. See, he was figuring on Obama passing the torch to Hillary Clinton. And they were counting on the sufficient cheating, which has been done time and time again here in the U.S. Vote fraud. But they with sufficient of vote fraud, you don't have more people coming out of the woodworks in the wrong places to tilt things over to the other side. That's what happened. and they didn't even expect where it fell apart at. That tells you something there too. And the only places that cheating were popping up, the only one I'm aware of was Georgia, and it was the White House that was trying to meddle with it. What was going on with the election board there? So when I think about it, Georgia would have been a pretty big turnover right there. A few votes go with that. But things didn't work out right, and the people in Georgia complained about it to the news, and it was on the news. Boy, it went out of the news real fast too. You still don't really hear too much about that, and CNN won't touch it. But we do know that there was all kinds of funnies going on, and Illinois increasingly is looking really bad. Should be. I mean, we really do joke, vote early, vote often, and we're not exactly joking. There's a lot of people who do that we know. There's a couple people I know personally, and I rather resent the fact that they think it's their right to negate my vote. So, or wherever I'm voting at the time. But I'm not going to vote Democrat again. Not after this. After this, forget it. It's not going to happen. But this letter and the site, I will add to it. It was it's goingdown.org. That it's an alarming site, and it does have a blueprint for really the anti-fascist group and what they had in mind. You can download it. And I do thank my friend Robert Pinkston for really pointing it out to me. I got it somewhere else. Kind of just I put it on my pad, and I intended to look at it later, but he ended up mentioning it, that that's what it was, and that there was another one that was going around that wasn't real. But this one was. So, and this is a really long manual here. I won't read everything in it, but they blame everything that goes wrong on the far right, and the far right. The Nazis and the Klan and those guys who really are their doppelgangers, or as I should say, doppelganger. They manipulators, big mouths, loose cannons, and provocateurs. That's why they have the right to shut down anybody that doesn't agree with them, right? That's really what it comes down to. But it's a very lengthy thing here, and I will put that in the links. What you have, though, is that the Democrats have corrupted themselves to the extent that they were willing to embrace this group and its violence. And even Pelosi saw where that's going. And people are not responding to this. People, as a matter of fact, are hostile to it. And now they're trying to say, oh, we didn't do anything. They're going to wear this one. Like I say, people are impressed with violence. And this violence has been going on for a pretty good while. It started long before Trump even ran for office. And it disappeared for years. it when we go back, okay, and we look at what happened in the 1970s. You know, it was during the 70s, during Carter era particularly, that the really the whole street violence, direct action, protest, and even the theater of the absurd that had gone on up until about 74 disappeared. And especially after Carter got elected. And that's where I kind of came in. I graduated in 76. And by the time I got out of school, they were actually telling us we needed to get a job, go to work. They weren't going to listen to us protest. Not only that, if we didn't get in line and we went out in the streets and rebelled, they were going to shoot us. That's exactly what they would tell us. So when that happened, and there were some attempts, you know, to at least air other opinions outside of what the Democrats had decided the, you know, spectrum would entail from now on. And they were pretty blunt about it. They thought for sure they had the Republicans destroyed. You know, with Nixon and all that stuff. And then Ford messed up. They just thought that they were never going to come back. Well, guess what? Utopia means no place. And a lot of people who had joined the Democrats became very disillusioned by them. And you had people that thought just like Reagan did, that I didn't leave the party left me. So the Republicans got a huge infusion of people from the Great Sellout. The Great Sellout had very definite repercussions. And it didn't work the way they planned on it. What you had was they all went with the Alinsky idea that you could do more damage from the inside the system. Well, they found out that they weren't going to be allowed to tinker with the system like they were planning on doing. Now, you did have a lot of them that got into the deep state. That did turn out to be the case with them, and that they've promoted an agenda, generally a democratic one, but not always. I mean, it would embrace certain aspects of neoconservatism too. That this deep state formation was always there, and it became more and more and more conforming to really to the culture that it embraced, which was essentially the one that occurred during the Great Sellout, and it's been embraced by generations since. You know, the boomers to the first wave boomers to the second wave, and then to the Gen X, right, and then to the millennials now, and then you've got Generation Z coming, and they haven't gotten there yet. So they're on the outside. And even the millennials haven't fully been embraced because they're looking for that handout a little bit much. So that Great Sellout and the connection to the idea of manipulating forces, I think, should explain why Soros would grab onto the group like this. Because in some ways he kind of likes certain aspects of their philosophy, but he's not an anarchist. Not by any stretch of the word. He'll take those people and shoot them in the back room and then come out smiling. They're useful idiots. And that's what they've been ever since, because when the barricades were shut down, and that was done by 76, it was done before then, but it was done by then. When that happened, anytime something like that would actually come out and actually get any traction was by design. There was an anti-globalist movement that sprouted up during the Clinton era, and it was partly in response to NAFTA, GATT, and the WTO and things of that nature. These different treaties, economic treaties in particular. For so-called free trade, and it wasn't free trade. It was actually a very highly regulated and manipulated, politically dominated deals that were made between the U.S. and other countries. And generally speaking, they benefited the other countries more than they did the U.S. And I think that part of that has been a way of overthrowing those governments. You look at it. They send the money their way and they undermine them. But this whole deconstructive philosophy that has entered into the modern neocon neoliberal vision and the center that they have constructed to cover the spectrum as an establishment expression, what we are allowed to see and what the press is allowed, or the press is encouraged to promote as the vision that we are allowed to look at. See, this is where really Trump strips away the cloak. Sanders was trying to also, and bless him for it. Unfortunately, where I'm concerned, his big problem was that he didn't renounce the violence himself, which I think has been a problem for even progressives, the real progressives, to recognize that, hey, this is a problem. And I think we're seeing more and more of them coming to that conclusion, even before the Democrats. And we also saw it with Ron Paul. Ron Paul is one of these people that actually presents a point of view that is not endorsed or embraced by the establishment politics and by the mainstream media. And what he did was what Sanders did this time around. He did it before, and he proved that Romney was illegitimate because Romney had to steal the primary away from him, just as much as Hillary Clinton had to steal it from Sanders. That's the only reason why that the Republicans were more likely to not interfere any further with the primary process that the Democrats were. See, the Republicans took care of their problem to a greater extent than did the Democrats ever have. And the only mess they have left is the neocons and their corruption. And maybe yet Trump might fix that. So, at any rate, I've gone from Antifa to this. But I think I've covered what I really wanted to go to for this one. But I do want to look at the other groups that consist of Antifa and the type of groups that also go into it, and BAM and the workers, World Workers Party, I think, and then there's maybe a couple others that I'll look at in particular. That these are the things that go into Antifa, and when it fractures and they go scurrying like a bunch of cockroaches into the corners, then we'll know what we're looking at there and kind of anticipate it before it happens. So with that, I'm going to say until next time.